good evening, and welcome to It Came From Beyond the Mic. I am your host, Cortez, and, honestly, I think you all deserve a bit of an apology, so I'm gonna start with that. So, I haven't put out an episode of this podcast in, 2, maybe 3 months, and, I feel bad about that, I really do, but the holiday season came up and kind of threw all my shit off. I had made myself sort of a schedule. I was able to put out weekly content, though, with varying success. Then my schedule was thrown off because my internet was out for a little bit, and then I was just like, well, it's the holiday season anyway, I'm busy doing other things. And then I just got lazy, because when your schedule gets thrown off, your whole groove is kind of fucked, at least for me. That and, I don't know, just a bunch of other shit. So, I want to apologize heavily to my audience that I have not put out an episode. However, this is our first episode of 2020, the new decade, so I think there's something to be excited about. Like always, we're talking about them horror movies, and I got a weird one this week. So this movie is actually recommended to me by my friend Katie. It's called Escape from Tomorrow, which, heads up, I'm just going to be talking about spoilers about literally everything about this film. I always do. Always talk about spoilers. And goddamn, okay, so for those of you who have never heard of this film, not Edge of Tomorrow, that's a different film. Escape from Tomorrow. It's one thing that it's known for is that it was illegally filmed at Disney World, and it's like, oh, that's like the infamous thing. That's what we know it for. It was filmed at Disney World. Whoa. So it's filmed at Disney World and Epcot. After watching the film, I was like, oh, it's Disney World and Epcot in Florida, I guess, or whatever. Oh my god, this fucking movie. Alright, this movie's pretty... I'm just gonna say, this movie's fucking bad. I feel like that's all it really has, is that it was recorded illegally at Disney World. Wow, that's so crazy. This movie has, nothing to say, and there is no plot. There are things that happen, and it's fucking rancid. Oh my god. Where do I even start? I guess we'll start with our main character. His name is Jim. He's a dad. He has a wife named Emily, a son named Elliot, and a daughter named Sarah. I'm not really going to be talking about names too much. We're just going to talk about Jim, because Jim is a fucking tool. It's the basic premise. Jim and his family, they're on vacation, going to Disney World for a weekend, whatever the fuck, I don't know. And first thing we get from the film is Jim gets fired from his job, and he gets that over the phone. He's like, oh, fuck. So then that kind of puts a damper on the situation, but he does not tell his family, doesn't tell his wife. They're like, all right, whatever, we're going to go to Disney World, yay! And it takes this movie so fucking long to, get good. And when it was good for, a second. I actually felt something for, 3 minutes, and then it stops. And then it's all gone, and then it's back to just cockamamie fucking... I don't want to be too mean, I guess. I don't know. I've never really been outwardly mean to a film on this podcast before. I mean, I talked about what I liked and didn't like about It Follows. I found value within that film, but this film, I don't fucking get it. There's nothing. I guess you could argue that there's value in this. It's interesting, but like I said, all it has is that it was illegally filmed at Disney World. The story is a whole heap of nothing, and there's no, message. In fact, so I do horror movies. This movie, I guess, is a horror movie. It had 2 seconds of something scary, but it's more surrealist, honestly, than it is horror. From what I saw, it's classified as a fantasy horror, but I feel like it's really a fantasy comedy, maybe horror, with an inch of horror. Because the only horror that I found in this movie, really, was they were on the ride It's a Small World. And everyone's like, oh, it's a creepy ride. Whoa, everyone's creeped out by it anyway. But then there were shots of the little animatronics, and then they would put scary faces on them for a second. Oh, it has sharp teeth and snake eyes. For a second. They did that on a couple... They did that in the Small World ride. There was a ride that was a boat ride, and that took place in Mexico, fictionalized Mexico. They did that there. And then there was a girl who they gave her the face for a second, and it's what is that? And it was kind of funny, cheesy, and I thought it would be a precursor of things to come, because the first time they do it, it's 15 minutes in the movie. I'm like, oh, good, it's kicking off already, good. But then immediately when they leave It's a Small World, everything goes back to normal for a long time, and it's basically just Jim, the dad, being fucking creepy for a lot of the movie, because I'd say a big quote-unquote plot, saying it there, this movie has a plot is very generous, but a big portion of this film is Jim, and he's with one of his kids, either Elliot or Sarah. You know, they alternate, but like his wife will watch one and he'll be with the other. It's just him pursuing these two French girls. And I didn't mention the French girls yet. You don't know the names ever. But it's these two French girls, and he is pursuing them throughout the park. And he's like, you know, following them onto like the rides they're going on just to like gaze at them, I guess, because he's fucking weird. It's also implied that the girls are underage. Because there's like a line, his wife is like, don't you think that's a bit young for your age, Jim? When, like, you know, things start getting a little bit more climactic, you know, he's coming unraveled. But it's just so stupid. It's... this film is batshit crazy, too, because... Fuck, I don't even know where to, like, go with this film, because this film makes no sense to me. This film wants... Okay, truthfully, I don't know what this film wants, but here's what I feel like it wants. If it wants to be serious, if it takes itself seriously... It wants to be the kind of horror movie where it's like, oh, this is how the horrifying situation will affect the family and deteriorate their mental health, and then they turn on each other. And it's like, oh, the bad side's coming out because of the stressful situation that they're put under. Oh, like, you know, the evil theme park is making this man less of a family man and more of a bastardization of himself. I don't think it can be taken seriously with that, because it's just so poorly delivered. The acting's, like, okay sometimes, but for the most part it's pretty bad. Which just makes the delivery of, like, that hypothetical idea even worse. And the kids aren't affected, that's whatever, I guess. The kids are oblivious to fucking everything for some reason, so it's just him and his wife kind of going at each other from time to time. It's so whack. And then if the film doesn't want to be taken seriously, I feel like it wanted to be like The Room, almost. Not literally like The Room, but something that has so bad that it's good value to it, where it becomes somewhat of a pop culture, like, irony thing, where, like, because there was, like, a line where it's like, yeah, like, the dude, Jim, got a turkey leg from one of the vendors, and then he's talking to this woman, which, this woman is relevant, we'll get to her in a second. He's talking to this woman, and she's like, that's not actually a turkey leg, you know? He's like, what is it then? She's like, it's emu. And to me, that line sticks out, because it feels almost like they were trying to make some sort of a joke that, like, people could use in the real world, like, oh, dude, I got a turkey leg at Disney World. Dude, that's not turkey, that's emu. And it's like how, like, what, the room has, like, what, plastic forks or some shit like that? I don't know what it is. And then, or, like, how Birdemic has, like, hangers tied to it. Just, like, weird shit like that. It felt like a poor use of my time, and it was only an hour and a half long, but fuck me. I think it gets to be something at, like, an hour in, and that's, you know, 2/3 of the film, and then it ends, and you're like, what the fuck did I just watch? So I mentioned this woman. There's sort of this implication that she's like... No, it's not even an implication. It's straight out said that she is a witch. And it's just bizarre, and Jim has sex with her at one part. She says this line that fucking killed me. She says, feel the inside of my vagina, or something like that, or like, feel my vagina, while she's, like, riding him, and I thought that was so goddamn funny, I just had to mention it on the podcast. So this witch woman, like, abducts his daughter Sarah at, like, the latter half of the film, and then he goes and saves her, but there's no, like, consequence or, like, just desserts to anyone or anything. Because what I was looking out for, I was like, oh, I thought some sort of violence would happen, like Jim would lash out and maybe not hurt his family, but he'd, like, fucking freak out on someone and, like, kill someone or something. But there's none of that. There's not even, like, a message that's, like, anti-Disney. It just so happens to be at Disney World because, like, of the vacation setting. There's, like, nothing of that. It's... Because, like, okay, Disney is creatively bankrupt right now. They're just turning everything into a cinematic universe, and it's just... I feel like I'm eating vomit when I watch some other films. But that's its own thing. I just wanted to toss that out there. But I think the closest thing we get to some sort of, like, anti-Disney thing, is Jim gets abducted after he loses his daughter. That's when his daughter gets abducted, and he gets abducted as well by, like, a scientist. And the scientist is like, you came here when you were younger, right, Jim? And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, with your father. You came to the park with your father. And he's like, what are you talking about? And then this machine manifests, like, the you know the Epcot Orb? Like, the big fucking, like, tesseract ball dodecahedron type looking thing that's outside of the Epcot thing? Just go Google it if you don't know what it is. It kind of, like, manifests a smaller version around his head. And then the doctor's like, yes, we're scanning your imagination. Quite an imagination you've got on you. You're just like DW himself. Also, something funny, when the Epcot Orb is manifesting around Jim's head, he's like, are you with Disney? But they censor it. It's like D, and then they censor the thing, and then it ends with like Y. It's so stupid. I'm like, okay. They also like censor the name of Neosporin. They call it Geosporin or something. It feels like a joke film. It doesn't feel like it wanted to be taken seriously. Oh, another thing. Speaking of jokes in the movie, it's in black and white the whole time. I can't believe I failed to mention this already. The film is black and white the entire time to add, I guess, some sort of like art to it, like an art feeling to it. But it's just, it doesn't add anything to the film. It doesn't make me more unnerved to see it in black and white. Anyway, this doctor's like scans his brain, and then he leaves the room for a second, and then he gets out of his bindings by spraying Neosporin on the machine and breaking it. And then he uses like a taser thing to like shut a door on the doctor's head, and the doctor's head comes off, but he's a fucking robot the whole time. It's like, what? And that moment when the doctor's head came off, and like that was like kind of a cool sequence, that is when I felt something in the movie, but that happens at like an hour in, or so, hour, 10 minutes, whatever. That is the most exciting that this film got to me. And then after that, he's searching for his daughter, and it's just... the bulk of this movie is him creeping after these two French girls, and just, I don't know, like living vicariously, missing out on youth, being just a creepy old fucking guy, middle-aged dad, creepo type beat. It's messy. It's all just so messy. I'm going to mention this now, because I'm going to very quickly wrap up my thoughts on this movie, because I'm running out of things to say. Because there's just... Anyway. There's a part in the film where his daughter gets knocked down by, like, this random kid. And she skins her knee. And he's like, oh, no, honey. And then they go to the nurse at the Disneyland or whatever. And they patch her up. They, clean it off with... disinfect it. And then they put a Band-Aid on. And he's talking to the nurse, and she's like, what about you, sir? Are you okay? I know your daughter's fine now, but how about you? Any, like, flu-like symptoms? He's like, no, I'm fine. I take vitamin C. And she's like, okay, well, just gotta make sure, because there's, like, cat flu going around. Cat flu. And he's like, alright, this is weird. So he, like, takes his daughter out, and then the nurse, like, when they leave the room, the nurse starts, like, breaks down crying, and it's just really, really weird. And it was like, okay, that was, like, a weird thing. Like, I don't know what dimension this exists where there's, like, a cat flu, but it's mildly funny, whatever. It was kind of like a throwaway thing at first. It comes back at the end. Because there's a part where one of the French girls spits on him because he doesn't want to go hang out with them because he, he's kind of sobering up. He comes to his senses. He's like, I'm a family man. I can't go pal around with these underage French girls. She spits in his face for some reason. Then it comes back later to bite him in the ass because after he delivers his daughter back to their hotel room after rescuing her from the witch, he starts violently shitting himself. And honestly, I thought the movie was going to end after he, like, drops his daughter off, maybe, like, get into bed and be like, okay, this is like an ending that makes sense. Or something. But then he starts violently shitting himself, and then he starts throwing up. Except he's not vomiting, it's hairballs. And I was like, why is there hairballs? That's kind of, like, gross. I kind of like how gross that is. And then he, like, stops and he's like, cat flu. And I'm like, oh, this is fucking stupid, actually. Never mind. I was going to give it, like, credit for being, like, disturbing. Just because I was like, oh, that's gross, like a human spitting up a hairball. But he's like, oh, it's cat flu. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me right now? And then he's, like, trying to take his vitamin C in desperation, and then he dies next to the hotel toilet. He, like, coughs up blood or something, and then there's, like, a Disney cleaning crew that comes in and, like, cleans him up the next morning. This is the ending of this film. When the doctor scanned his imagination earlier, he shows Jim a version of himself in, like, a black suit and, like, a fedora with, like, a different wife and a different daughter. He has no son, it's just him and his other wife and his daughter. And he's like, who is that? And the doctor's like, that's you, Jim. That's an imagination version of yourself that you can't even see in your own brain. So he's like, what the hell? So that felt like another weird throwaway thing, but that comes in at the end. When the cleaners take away his body in a white van, who pulls up to the hotel that his family was staying at other than Imagination Jim, the ideal, I don't know, perfect world Jim? And he pulls up with his family, and they check in, and that is the ending. And I don't know what anything that this movie was trying to say was. I have no clue. It's so vapid. Cinematography was okay, I'll say that, but there were a lot of ugly shots where you could obviously tell there were things were green screen, so this movie felt like super sloppy. It's a spectacle only in the fact that you're watching it because it was illegally filmed at Disney World. I can say the most, like, narrative thing it has to say for itself is maybe, like, the Jim that we watched throughout the film had to die so that imagination Jim could live. I don't know. It seemed maybe fake deep. It just smells like a lot of fake deep to me. Just a lot of weird ideas and a lot of fake deep. So it's a mess. Go watch it if you want to waste a good chunk of time and just see what all the hubbub's about. Nobody talks about this film enough, which is fine. There's nothing to talk about because this movie has nothing. Like I said, I feel like it wants to be one of those like ironic things that people talk about, but it just doesn't have enough to it. There's not enough meat on them bones. Regardless, those are my thoughts on Escape from Tomorrow. A very whack-ass fucking film to start the year off with. Thank you to my friend KDP for recommending it to me. I appreciate it, but it was stinky and I hated it. Before I, give the old outro, I would like to say this is probably my last episode that I'm going to be putting out on Podomatic, my former podcast host. I think I'm going to be switching over to Anchor.fm. I'm going to bring all the old episodes in, and then for the going forward, I'm going to be using Anchor.fm. I apologize, Podomatic. You were good to me, but I feel like you're a little too antiquated, a little too old. I know you have an app and all that, but the website interface is really bad, and there's also like storage limits that I was going to have to probably face and work around in the future. I don't really fuck with that, so I'm sorry. To my viewers, I'll make a tweet and stuff like that. I'll be making it known. I'll be using Anchor.fm in the future. Just wanted to give a heads up. Thank you, Podomatic, but sorry, Anchor FM. It's kind of sexy. So, thank you for, listening in. I was/am your host, Cortez. Thank you for joining me this evening. I hope you all have a wonderful night.